That was Ontario's new housing minister, Paul Calandra, just a few days on the job now, promising an open review of the so-called Greenbelt land deals. The Ford government in that province opened up protected conservation lands for development, but two watchdog reports have since slammed the way that process unfolded, and the opposition is accusing Ford of corruption aimed at benefiting a small group of his own supporters. So will the new housing minister in his new review be able to diffuse the controversy? Let's bring back the front bench to talk about that. Elliot Hughes, Gary Marr, Anne McGrath, and Laura Stone. Laura, you've been all over this at Queen's Park, so I'll start with you. What is your sense? You're there every day, you're asking questions of the minister and others. Did the press conference today, did the commitment for an open review of what's happened so far do anything to diffuse the fire Premier Ford is facing?
Well, I think the government is trying to, and we just heard that Paul Calandra is up again tomorrow, probably bombarding us with more information. The government's problem here is that it has been a drip, drip, drip of information and controversy for weeks now, and everything stemming from the Auditor General's report and the Integrity Commissioner's report. And the government is trying to put as much distance between itself now by promising kind of this vague review and a look at the Greenbelt lands. At the end of the day, though, it doesn't really change the fact that they are opening up the Greenbelt to development, and in fact, potentially more of the Greenbelt than they initially did. And so I don't think this is going to stop the criticism and the pressure from the opposition to reverse their decision. I think that they're scrambling here a little bit to look like they are achieving action, but at the end of the day, they're not changing anything that came about this very controversial process about choosing the land. So no, I don't think it's going to work for them. I think it's going to continue to raise more questions than it answers. And we still don't know the parameters of this review, how it's going to work. So the government's out there every day trying to do damage control, but I think they still have quite a bit of work cut out for them.
I feel also, and Anne, Laura touched on this, the ability for them to diffuse this is constantly hampered by the fact that in every press conference, including today and then yesterday with Premier Ford, whatever they are announcing ends up through reporter questioning to result in the fact that they might actually open up more of that protected land. They're just not ruling it out, basically. They won't say no unequivocally, which from a political, I understand they might have some pragmatic reason for doing so, but from a political perspective, given what's happened over the last few weeks, is like a little dumbfounding.
It makes no sense. As a matter of fact, if you were teaching issues management, this would be an example of how not to handle a controversial issue, because they have not been forthcoming. They have not recognized where this was going and tried to get out in front of it and deal with it. I'm going to sidestep the issue of how ironic it is for me and probably anyone who remembers the Harper government to have Paul Calandra be the one that goes in to try and clean it up. But, you know, really, what was said today just reinforces and doubles down on the perception that I think is not just a perception, that they're more interested in helping out wealthy developers than in actually getting housing for people, because it's clear that they don't have to do what they're doing, and that people really believe that there is something really smelly about what's happening here.
It's so interesting, Gary, to kind of contrast the perception versus reality, and in politics especially, right? Perception can matter a lot. It appears like the Premier and his government are really married to the idea of this. They believe in the reasons that they've put forth for doing it, but they are a pretty experienced government by this point, and they also in the past have been able to pivot when the perception of what they're doing really is to their detriment. I'm wondering, from your perspective, if you're surprised at all there hasn't been a real, genuine pivot yet.
Well, it's harder for me to comment on this coming from Western Canada, but you know, there's something like 1 million acres in the Greenbelt, and I think that always when governments focus on why they're trying to do something, the how is not as important. And so if they can maintain the narrative that the reason why they're doing this is to create more affordable housing, then perhaps they can win on the issue about developing of the Greenbelt. But on the other hand, you know, I want to comment on this, that the fact that the minister resigned, I think it makes it interesting to see when ministers will resign. I mean, I remember Bev Oda, federal cabinet minister in the Harper government, resigning over a $16 glass of orange juice. I remember Art Eggleton, a federal Liberal minister, who resigned over giving a contract to a girlfriend. And I just haven't seen this kind of resignation over an issue like this done by the federal government. We were talking about issues like this with the current federal government, and we talked about the drip, 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 and things were coming out piece by piece, and it's very interesting to me to see that Doug Ford and his ministers took this seriously. They are trying to pivot. Whether they succeed or not will depend upon whether the public believes in the why they're trying to deal with the Greenbelt and make it available for affordable housing.
Elliot, the minister that Gary's referring to is Steve Clark. And yes, he did resign eventually on Monday, but on Friday, following the release of the Integrity Commissioner's report in Ontario that kind of singled him out for not being involved in the way he should have and overseeing what did become a political process or keeping it from being one. He said he apologizes and takes responsibility, but wouldn't resign. So it took the weekend for him to eventually resign. And I guess as far as pivot goes, yes, certainly they have pivoted to say the process was flawed. It'd be hard not to say that given the conclusions the AG and the Integrity Commissioner arrived at. But I guess I mean pivot in the Doug Ford, real true Doug Ford sense of the word, right? He's sort of an anomaly in Canadian politics. To his great success, he's been able throughout so much of COVID to be able to say, okay, we got it wrong. I'm going to scrap that and go in a different direction. And ultimately, it resulted in an amplified mandate for him in the last election. I guess I wonder, given the backlash here, maybe their assessment is the backlash doesn't necessitate that. But I know, our minister resigned, as Gary said, it's pretty rare. It's hard to see how it doesn't.
Yeah, this has just picked up steam over the summer. And I think with Parliament coming back at the Ontario level soon, this is just going to get more and more fuel is going to be added to the fire. The only reason you can really come up with as to why they aren't simply doing a full reversal is because they really are in the pockets of developers. There is no other reason. Politically, it makes zero sense to continue. They should just call it quits, apologize, reverse, and move on, because we know where this is going. The RCMP is now involved. And I won't be perhaps as polite as Anne and say when Paul Calandra is involved, it tends to be a dumpster fire. He was doing the same thing in the Harper government, defending the indefensible, and he finds himself in the same position here. Perhaps he's just got a lot of practice and he's become pretty good at it. But it does seem, to Laura's point earlier, it seems strange that they keep adding these small things here and there, thinking that that's going to turn the page that Ontarians are going to forget. And it just is so clear, I think, to a lot of people outside looking in, saying, no, you need a full reversal. You need to sort of pull the chute, so to speak, and just come up and say, we apologize, we erred, and move on. Because until then, this is just going to drag on, and it's going to hurt Ford's polling numbers eventually, if not already.
The only caveat I'd add to that is that the matter has been referred to the RCMP. We don't have any confirmation from the RCMP at this time that they're investigating. I will also add, though, they don't usually say yes or no to that stuff. We have a lot of history asking. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, all four of you, for a great discussion. I really appreciate it. Gary Marr, Elliot Hughes, Laura Stone, and Anne McGrath.